Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I know that it is past noon and literally having some difficulties, but we are here. So I'm not even going to say difficulties, just working with tech. But definitely excited to be here with you all on this Thursday as we are talking about budgets. So, I am just going to wait about a minute or two, get into the content, and this will be here for the replay. So that will be awesome. And from there, and again, it's just running all over. So we're gonna go with it. And I hope you all are having an awesome afternoon. Okay, so while I am just trying to ensure that I have all of this shared in different spaces. I know it looks so dark. Yeah, we're gonna get it. Okay, we're gonna roll with it. It's a great Thursday. We are going to roll right along with it. So, this episode is sponsored by the Decision Makers Leader Circle. I know that you, as nonprofit leaders, you are always concerned about what I consider the top three or the three T's: your time, your talent, the people that are going to help you, and then building your team, right? And then your treasure, which is your income and revenue and all that great stuff. And so I value your time. And the Decision Makers Leader Circle is an intentional program to where I meet with you respecting all of those top three things of your concern. And we meet every week on Tuesday mornings and we talk about how do we scale and maximize and increase your time, your talent, and your treasure. And if you want to be in a program where you are with nonprofit leaders and you are talking about those nonprofit components that actually adds value as you are growing and scaling and building your nonprofit organization, then you want to be inside the Decision Makers Leader Circle. You have the link in the comments for you all to join and subscribe and meet us every Tuesday, bright and early in the morning. This is the definite the definite meetup that you want to be in. This is the circle, this is the program that as a nonprofit leader that is catered to you, for you, and your explosive growth. So again, meet us inside the Decision Makers Leader Circle. Join us, and it's subscription based by month. And so I know that you're going to find value. But in the instance you say, hey, this is not for me, you can easily opt out. There is no pressure. But I haven't had anyone to opt out of the program yet. So again, it's the Decision Makers Leader Circle. The link is in the comments. All right, so let's get to it. We are talking about nonprofit budgets. 4 minutes has passed, and I think that's enough time to, let people know and all these meta algorithms to find its way. If you missed the replay from last Thursday, please, I advise you to go back and do that. That's part one. We are on part two today, and what we are going to talk about briefly is expenses. Our expenses. We're going to talk about expenses. And again, go back and watch the replay. And if you want to learn more about this, again, join the Leader Circle, right? So, because we're diving deeper into this with real life examples, I walk you through these things inside the circle. But I want to give you a synopsis, however, of planning your budget, again, that B word can really scare us as nonprofit leaders and directors, or especially if you are a new nonprofit entity and you've never developed a budget. Because believe it or not, people take things for granted, and that's the purpose of these live trainings that I'm doing with you over the next 4 weeks. That we often take terms and practices for granted, that people know to develop a budget, people know how to develop a budget. And again, I think I shared with you all last week that in the 8 years that I have been consulting with nonprofit organizations, I have never really covered a budget outside of doing a grant writing course. And so it's just one of those topics to where I didn't feel like I wanted to share about or teach. And with that, let me preface this by saying I am not a CPA or a tax attorney. Okay. But I do want to share with you all that a budget is really the roadmap, and it really is the guide, and it helps us frame our narrative. It helps us frame our ask, that when we go to donors, when we are looking for sponsorships, or we are preparing grant applications, it is that roadmap to know what you are asking for. And so part one will really show you how to start that budget process. Today, I want to talk about some of the expenses, because I often get that question, well, what do or do we actually put into a budget, to where how do we know what we're spending? And so it's really easy. You are already doing the great things, right? And you already probably have a bank account. And so one of the ways into which you can extract this information, if you don't have a system, is to get your bank statements. Even if you have been putting this on some personal accounts and paying for this and self-funding this on your own, that's perfect. You have the data to start. But let me just give you some tips on some of the other expenses that you may have already uh, have or may have known about, or need to be aware of as you are formulating your budget, or if you are refining your budget. So what are some of those expenses? Let me get my handy dandy notebook here. Uh, there are categories that I think maybe would be helpful if you would categorize your budget with programs, general and administration funds, and maybe and fundraising. Now, people do their budgets differently, but I think it would be helpful if you at least start out with some categories of expenses. And so you have your program budget. Again, that's the heart of your nonprofit. What is going to take your supplies and different things as you are executing your programs and your activities of your nonprofit. And then you have your general and administration funds, to where if you are leasing a facility, if you are this is where your executive director stipend or salary comes from. Also fuel costs and utilities, right? These are these things that helps you as you are leading and doing the everyday things and the structural things that comes behind that leadership with your nonprofit. And then also you have your fundraising expense. And these are the things where you hear the phrase, it takes money to make money, that you set aside some funding as you are doing various fundraising activities, maybe such as hosting a banquet or a silent auction. Your fundraising line item, sometimes people start out with that line item, sometimes people do not, as well as with your general and administration line item, as far as category, excuse me. There are some people that will break that up and say, hey, well, our general funds are those funds that we need to ensure that we have reserves. And so we're building up our nonprofit cash flow, and this is money that we have for operating support as well. And then you have your administrative funds, to where this is where you just have salaries come out of. There are different ways that people have nonprofit budgets. I always say whatever is the easiest way, and as you are building and you can take the time to invest and then have a CPA or have a nonprofit tax accountant to work with you, then you can be able to refine refine that process and those accounting measures. But in the interim, don't get so bogged down with trying to have these perfect categories to where you don't capture anything at all. I know from personal and professional experience to where when you do overload yourself with that how, then you don't do the what. And then that's where the chaos comes in when it comes down to trying to track your financial expenses. Okay. So those are just some brief categories, and you can choose to amend that. You can separate that and have a supply budget within its own self, right? You can have, you may want to extract marketing and have that as a separate budget, and I'm sorry, a separate line item in your expenses budget. So again, however you and your board decide, just start somewhere, okay? Alrighty. So let's get to some of the expenses that you need as you're preparing your budget, and especially starting out. The first one will be your legal paperwork, and or if you're working with a consultant. Again, when it comes down to filing your paperwork with your articles of incorporation with the state or your 1023 form, and so this message is geared towards 501c3 nonprofit entities, that you can do the paperwork yourself. You really can, right? If you are comfortable with it. But if not, right? Because I don't want an attorney, sit up here and say like, well, don't advise that. You can, but if you are not comfortable, that's where these professionals come in at, or consultants come in at, to help you through that paperwork. And so you want to have a line item for their fees. And so, this could look anywhere from around $1,500 to $2,500. And I know you're probably saying, well, if I'm starting up and I don't have any money, how am I going to pay for that? Well, that's where, again, consultants come in at, because I teach my clients how to fundraise what they pay me. I know, unshameless plug. Okay, so, but that's, an item, that's what you want to consider, that you will have those consulting fees, and or just paying the state that you're registered in, and paying the government. And those fees are not, that's their fees, and those are set fees. And then you will add your legal fees or your consulting fees, and that's a part of your expenses. Another thing to add and to consider is general liability insurance, especially if you are going to have a nonprofit entity that's going to have a lot of volunteers, or you have a space. I think it's great to get that covered, and as well as the liability insurance that protects your volunteers. And now I'm talking about your board of directors, because they are volunteers from certain liabilities of being sued or being blamed for certain situations. So it's good to have your general liability insurance. I'm not getting endorsed by anyone. I need to start looking into that. But one of the first places that I would start is just going through your own insurance company. But they do have different spaces, like on different platforms. And I think there's a site like Charity Navigator that has different uh, nonprofit insurance recommendations that you can look into. But that's also an expense, especially if you will have a facility, and or you're going to be working with certain vulnerable populations like children. It's great to pay the $20 a month, whatever that is, right? So that's something that you may want to consider. I also think that something of value to consider with your expenses as you are preparing your budget are the website fees. In this day and age, I can get it out. You will need some public platform, and social media is great. So of course, start with all your free resources, but eventually, even if you just have, one or two pages in the platform, that you may can even build your own, Wix and these different places, you can actually build your own website now. But there will be a minimum fee of hosting, of getting a domain name, and getting the website link and all of this stuff. And so even if you do it by yourself, it still will be an expense. And this is a part of your startup funds. And even if you are seasoned and have only been utilizing social media, but you want to now go to a website and or some other platform. I know a lot of people have a link tree site, but even then to integrate and start selling stuff, they have like a paid feature. So basically, you there will be some paid component, or something that you have to pay for with your name, or again the domain name, and or the platform to host it. So those fees should be accounted for in your budget. And why it's important, because as you are fundraising, even for startup cost, because you can fundraise for seed funding with your nonprofit as you are getting off the ground. Having a budget will better prepare your conversation and shift your narrative, so that when people ask you, well, what are your needs? And then you can say, hey, so we have this prepared budget, and we've really looked into all the expenses that it's going to take us, and for us to recoup all the personal investments that we have made. And we're asking you to come alongside us and support us as we get this nonprofit off the ground, because here's the problem that we are going to solve. But this is the work that we have to do first, right? And so it helps you if you know that you need $5,500 to start. It helps you to just break it down, if needed, over coffee, and just to have that conversation. Alrighty. The next line item that's also of importance, again, you want to have just, I wouldn't call it a miscellaneous, but you do just want to have funding. Let's just say fundraising. Let's just do that. Let's just make it easier. If you fundraising expenses, again, it takes money to make money. So you may want to host a launch banquet, right? You're going to have to invest first into a deposit for the venue, a deposit for the caterer, to print off tickets if you're going to still do tickets. There's just certain expenses if you're going to have performances. And so you should always have a line item that's going to be dedicated to just money that you have to output to carry out certain fundraising activities. Again, it takes money to make money. And leading with, well, we don't have any money to start with, I get it. I definitely get it. This is why it's important, if you prepare this budget, and as you're asking people to partner along with you as you're building up the first phases of this nonprofit, it will help you get to those spaces to where you do have this money to put on these events. As a nonprofit organization, sometimes there's this narrative, or this, I think, the mindset that when you get your 501c3 status, that people should automatically donate to you, and that people should automatically support you. And that's just not the case, right? It's faulty thinking, and it places you into a place of a false sense of arrogance, that people should donate to you when there are millions of causes. And also it negates you from doing the actual work and building community and having these conversations. So preparing budgets, they really are necessary, uh, and also will give you a great start. Now, the last one I want to talk to you about is just having money for programs, right? That's the heart and the meat of what you are doing as a nonprofit organization. In the first video, so I'm asking you all to please go back and watch the video, I did break down a little bit about how you would start breaking down your programs. Like, what does it take for us to run a program? And that does include, if you have a building, that includes if you have an after school program, and you have an after school snack, and you have 40 people, and that that to feed all 40 children, it takes you about $2.83, right? You calculate that up. And with that, that's how you would add that cost as far as your expense. It takes fuel, right, to go to these stores, to purchase these items. That's an expense. And you may have a van or transportation, and have a monthly cost to to for that fee, for that van payment, right? That's an expense. And you are going and you notice that you, from your bank statements, that you are spending about $34 in restocking crayons and different items as well. That's an expense. And so this is how we build up, that you take those little things that you do. And what I want to encourage you all is that budgets require work. This is why, though, it's important for you to get with your board and for you to go through this process, because it can be daunting. It can, seem very discouraging, um, and seems like a lot of work, but you really already have the data. You just have to capture it. And that's why working with your board members and particularly your treasurer will help you in this process, and or joining great programs such as the Decision Makers Leader Circle, where you can talk with me. But most importantly, you get to be in a space with other nonprofit leaders. And these are great nonprofit leaders that are doing magnificent work, that have stellar organizations, and they're committing to just continual learning by being in this space and in the program. And they're leaning on one another. So even if I don't talk with them, they're actually building community outside and sharing support and exchanging systems and exchanging connections and different platforms, which we're going to talk about, fundraising platforms and all this stuff as expenses, because these things do cost. But for the sake of today, I'll just wrap it up and conclude it here, that, with today's, some of your expenses, I didn't go into a lot of depth, but I know that you have enough to start calculating, the expenses that you pay for with, filing process, if you're working with a consultant, uh, as you are building up and you have your lease, or you've defined how you're breaking up and how much it costs for you to serve your target population, your insurance, I forgot one, right? All of these things go, your website expenses. These are things that you can at least utilize to have a beginning budget, so that you have a working frame point. Um, I'm sorry, that's working frame of reference. I think that's what I'm probably trying to say. And which will help you and aid you as you are seeking seed funding, and or if you're scaling a program, you can put the dollars and the data to your request. And that is really the purpose of your budget. It keeps you in a roadmap along this road and in this path of how we want to grow, and then also gives you the reflection of where you are and what's needed to get you to this next level of success. So I do hope that today you're able to glean from some of the information or all of the information that was shared. And if you also believe that this will be of value to your board members and to your volunteers, please share this information with them. And I would also love to talk with you if you just would like to briefly talk with me and just note more information. Please contact us through the Carrots Group page, and we'll be sure to get with you. But until then, and until next time for part 3, we dive deeper into expenses, but also we're going to dive deep into how do we attract the money into the organization. But we first have to know what we are needing. So this is why I've started with some of the expenses that you will need. We may do a little bit more in depth, since I started kind of late with all the technical things, and I hope y'all can see me well. It's just it's just one of those Thursdays with technology. But yeah, we'll dive into that possible little bit more before we start income as we are building our budgets. And if I can serve you in any way of your nonprofit or working with your board and your team, this is what I do. I am called to serve nonprofits and to help you disrupt narratives that nonprofits can actually be profitable. And if we integrate certain systems and principles and strategies into our operations, we can achieve our goals, so that we can do the greater work of impacting and transforming our communities. Until next Thursday, meet me back here at noon for part 3. You all have a great day, rest of your day. Have an awesome weekend, and I'll see you next time.